I was standing in the grand ballroom at the St. Regis in Atlanta, where my son's engagement party was being held, when I overheard the future bride whispering to her mother about social status and her open contempt for her backwoods future father-in-law. The exact words she used were, "that filthy old hillbilly." Have you ever felt the sound of your heart breaking inside your chest? Not the sharp crack of crystal glasses clinking around me on the banquet tables, but the deeper sound of a father's dignity collapsing. I just stood there in the middle of that shining hall under the bright glow of crystal chandeliers. My old suit from the 1,990 seconds suddenly felt out of place and almost shameful among all the expensive designer gowns. My hands, the same hands that had become rough and calloused after 40 years of working the red soil of Georgia, started to shake. I tried to hide them inside my pockets, but I couldn't control it. The strong smell of expensive perfume felt suffocating, nothing like the fresh scent of hay and damp earth after summer rain back on my farm. Cassandra Sterling stood there looking like an angel painted on a church ceiling, but the words coming out of her bright red lips were full of poison. She had no idea I was standing just a few steps behind her. She turned toward her mother, Deborah, and laughed in a mocking way. The older woman covered her mouth with a silk handkerchief while looking at me like I was a stain that needed to be removed from a clean marble floor. They both believed I was simple, that this old farmer could not understand their polished language of wealth and high society. For a moment, I almost turned around and walked away. I wanted to go back to my quiet farm where life is honest and kindness is not measured by the size of a man's bank account. But then I felt a firm hand on my shoulder. It was Malcolm, my son. He looked directly into my eyes with no shame, no embarrassment, only a strange, cold calmness. He leaned close to my ear and whispered in a low, sharp voice, "Easy, Dad. Tomorrow, I'll take everything back." I stared at him, the boy I raised with sweat and sacrifice after his mother died, and for the first time I saw something different in him. This was not simple anger. It was a plan already formed, a punishment carefully prepared. What I did not realize at that moment was that my son's plan would be far more devastating than anything I could imagine. But before I go further, I should introduce myself. My name is Eli. I'm a farmer who believes a promise is like a contract written in stone and should never be broken. The Sterling family is about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. They underestimated an old man who loves his land more than gold, and they made a terrible mistake when they crossed the final line involving my son. This is not just a story about betrayal. It is about a reversal so severe that no one in that glittering ballroom could have seen it coming. Stay with me, because what happened in the shadows tied to that old farm will change how you think about loyalty. Welcome back to Dad's Real-Life Revenge. To understand why Cassandra's insult cut so deeply, you need to understand my roots. I was not born into wealth or silk. I was born from the red soil of Georgia. My farm is not just land. It is sweat. It is pain. It is where I buried Sarah, my late wife. Sarah used to say my hands were the most beautiful hands she had ever seen, even though they were rough and scarred. She said they were the hands of an honest man. After she passed away, Malcolm became all I had left. I raised him in endless cornfields and taught him that a man's worth is measured by his word, not by his wealth. I was proud when he became successful in the city, but I never imagined he would bring someone like Cassandra Sterling into our lives. The first time I met her family was at their mansion in Greenwich. The place felt cold, like even the walls were frozen. Wallace Sterling shook my hand with a careless grip, his palm soft and weak, and his eyes looked at me like I was an old object that no longer had value. Deborah stood beside him, covered in jewelry, but her smile never felt real. They asked about my farm, its size, and ownership details. At first I thought they were just curious about their daughter's future family, so I answered honestly about the land my ancestors left me and about the highway project planned nearby. That was when I noticed a flash in Wallace's eyes. It was not kindness, it was hunger. But I ignored it. I thought it was interest. Cassandra also pretended to care about my health back then. She promised she would take care of Malcolm and treat the farm like a second home. My father once told me to be careful of people who smile too brightly before you truly know them. I should have remembered that warning. Instead, I let my son walk into a trap set by people with smooth words and sharp intentions. Out in the countryside, we know how to deal with snakes. We do not strike immediately. We wait until they fully come out of hiding. I thought I was preparing for a wedding, but I was actually preparing for a war. And the question that kept burning in my mind was simple. Could one old farmer stand against people who use money to twist truth? And where did my son stand in all of this? After that humiliating engagement party, Malcolm led me out to the parking lot. The Atlanta night wind was strong, but sweat still ran down my face. I wanted to shout at him, to demand answers, to ask why he let that woman insult his father, but he stayed silent. He guided me into the car and locked the doors. Then he pulled out a small voice recorder. His face was hard like stone. He looked at me and said only, "Dad, just listen." The recording started. There was static. Then Cassandra's voice came through, no longer sweet, but cold and calculating. "That old man is a fool. He'll sign anything his son puts in front of him." Then she laughed, a chilling sound that made my skin tighten. Wallace's voice followed, talking about the land and highway project and how once I signed power of attorney, they would take their share of the profits. Cassandra added confidently that Malcolm was under her control, and after the wedding the farm would belong to them. It felt like something was crushing my throat. They did not want a family. They wanted to take everything Sarah and I had built. In that moment, I realized I was nothing to them but a tool. My anger rose like fire. I turned to Malcolm and asked when he learned all this. He said he had suspected it for a long time and had secretly recorded them. That is when I understood my son was not weak at all. He had been gathering proof in silence. He was not only protecting the farm, but protecting our family name. He told me the Sterlings had done this before, stealing land from poor farmers using fake documents. That night, I could not sleep. I looked at my hands and realized they believed money could buy anything. They thought an old farmer could be easily broken by contracts and tricks. But they made one mistake. They forgot that even an old lion still has claws. Malcolm's plan slowly became clear. He had already contacted Tyrone, a skilled audio technician, and together they were preparing something for the wedding that would turn Cassandra's happiest day into a disaster. I could feel the truth burning inside those recordings, and I knew you would feel it too. So stay connected because justice was coming. The 3 days before the wedding felt endless. I went back to the farm and stood by Sarah's grave, promising her I would protect everything we built. Malcolm stayed in the city finishing the final steps. I met Tyrone at a roadside diner. He was young, sharp-eyed, and skilled with electronics. He was also the AV technician hired for the wedding. The Sterlings trusted him because he was the best, but they did not know he was Malcolm's close friend. Tyrone showed me a tablet where he had already accessed the St. Regis system. He had inserted the recordings into the wedding video presentation without anyone noticing. The trap was already set. He also told me something worse. The Sterlings planned to trick me into signing a fake contract at the reception when I would be distracted and emotional. That document would transfer 18% of the farm's value to them before the highway news became public. Their greed had no limit. It consumed everything like a dark hole. I looked at the guest list. Wallace Sterling sat there in complete silence. He was no longer the confident man who once walked into rooms wearing expensive suits and carrying the air of authority. There was no elegance left in him, no pride, no strength in his voice or posture. He simply looked broken, as if life had drained 10 years out of him in a single night. His face had turned pale and dull, almost gray, like cold ashes left behind after a fire had burned out. Beside him, Deborah kept crying softly into a handkerchief, trying to hide her tears, but no one in the courtroom seemed moved anymore. Sympathy had completely disappeared. The atmosphere had changed. What was once a room filled with tension was now filled with the heavy silence of final judgment. Cassandra sat very still in her chair, not moving at all. Her wrists were locked in steel handcuffs, and she kept staring at them as if she could not believe this was her reality. Those same hands had once imagined luxury, diamonds, wealth, and millions of dollars from the land deal they had planned so carefully. Now those dreams felt distant, like they belonged to another life that no longer existed. The judge cleared his throat, and instantly the entire courtroom became quiet. Even the smallest sound seemed to disappear. Then he began reading the verdict in a firm, steady voice. Every word he spoke felt heavy, like a hammer striking down again and again, sealing the fate of those who had chosen greed over honesty. He listed the charges clearly: organized fraud, forgery of official documents, and conspiracy to take over property on a large scale. He paused for a moment, letting the weight of the words settle in the room. Then he continued. Wallace Sterling was sentenced to 12 years in prison with no chance of bail. At that moment, a broken sound escaped Wallace's throat, and he leaned forward onto the table as if all strength had left his body completely. Deborah Sterling was sentenced to 8 years in prison as an active accomplice in the scheme. Her sobbing grew louder for a moment, but it did not change anything. The decision was final. Then came Cassandra's sentence. For planning and using emotional deception in the scheme, she was sentenced to 10 years in prison. As those words were spoken, Cassandra suddenly screamed, her voice filled with panic and disbelief, and she collapsed in her seat. Her eyes quickly turned toward Malcolm, searching for something, anything, maybe mercy, maybe sympathy, maybe a way out. It was a desperate final look, filled with regret and fear, but Malcolm did not respond. He stayed standing where he was, calm and unmoving. His expression was cold and steady, like someone who had stepped beyond anger into pure justice. He did not look away. In fact, he seemed determined to witness every second of their fall, as if he needed to see the truth reach its full conclusion. The Sterling family's illegal wealth was immediately frozen by the court. Their grand mansion in Greenwich, once a symbol of power and pride, was ordered to be sold off in auction. The money would go toward compensating the victims who had suffered because of their actions. The large highway project that had once been part of their plan would still continue, but now everything had changed. The promised 18% profit would no longer go into the hands of fraud or corruption. Instead, it would be fairly distributed among farming families who had worked the land for years and protected it with honest effort and sacrifice. I slowly looked out of the courthouse window. Outside, soft golden sunlight was spreading across the ground, warm and calm, almost as if the world itself was finally breathing again after a long storm. In that moment, a deep sense of relief filled my chest. Justice had finally been delivered, not in anger, but in truth. Those who once believed that money could bend reality or silence fairness had learned a painful and expensive lesson. Honor, I realized, is not something that can be bought, traded, or stolen. It belongs to a person's character, and once broken, it cannot be replaced. Malcolm had not only helped restore justice for me, but he had also shaken an entire system that once believed it was untouchable. He proved that even a farmer and his son, with patience and truth on their side, could challenge a powerful empire built on lies. As we left the courthouse and drove back toward Georgia, the sound of the judge's gavel still echoed in my mind again and again, like a final reminder of what had just happened. The journey felt quiet. When we finally reached the farm, the old iron gates appeared in the distance under the warm glow of sunset. Everything looked different now. Peaceful. Safe. The smell of soil and dry grass filled the air, wrapping around me like something familiar and comforting, like returning home after a long battle. I took a deep breath, feeling it fully for the first time in a long while. This was freedom, real freedom. Malcolm never returned to the city after that. He chose instead to stay on the land and rebuild everything together with me. The farm was no longer under the shadow of greedy men or hidden threats. The highway project had been redesigned and adjusted in a more honest way. We did not sell the land. Instead, we entered into a fair partnership with the developers and turned the area into a sustainable agricultural model that could benefit both people and the land itself. One quiet afternoon, Malcolm came home and brought someone with him. Her name was Emily. She was a teacher at the local elementary school. There was a calm kindness in her presence. Her eyes were soft and gentle, and her hands were not afraid of soil or hard work. When she looked at the farm, she did not see money or profit. She saw life, history, effort, and the stories hidden in every corner of the land. I quietly watched Malcolm and Emily walking side by side through the fields. The wind moved slowly across the crops, and everything felt calm and steady. In that moment, I somehow felt that Sarah, from somewhere beyond, was smiling. It felt like her legacy had been protected, not through force, but through truth, patience, and strength. We had proven that kindness, even when tested, can stand against manipulation and greed. I kept thinking about everything that had happened, and a simple truth settled in my heart. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Trusting your instincts is important, even when others try to confuse you or make you doubt yourself. Standing up for what belongs to you is not selfish. It is dignity. And standing up for truth, no matter how powerful the opposition is something that defines who you are. Life can be painful and unfair at times, but for those who stay strong and endure, it eventually reveals balance. The Sterling family lost everything because they underestimated honesty and values that cannot be destroyed by wealth. And we gained everything back, not because of luck, but because we refused to abandon our roots. In the end, the question remains, do you think this was the most satisfying ending possible? If you enjoyed this story, you are invited to join our community by liking and subscribing. Many people watch quietly without taking action, but it costs nothing to support, and it helps you stay connected to stories like this, where truth slowly but surely overcomes deception, where patience and courage bring justice back to broken lives. And as always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Stay strong on your path in life, and goodbye for now. We will meet again in the next story on Dad's Real Life Revenge.